The painting arrived without ceremony. It was wrapped in brown paper, frayed at the corners and heavy with age, tied with a single strand of black twine. There was no return address, only a yellowing card tucked beneath the string with a name handwritten in faded ink, for the last of the Holworth line. It sat for days in the front hall of the house on Elmswood Lane, untouched. Evelyn Holworth, a quiet woman in her late 40s with no surviving family, had inherited the house from an uncle she barely remembered, a man who had lived alone, reclusive and half-forgotten, in the hills outside Norwich. His death had been unremarkable. A heart attack. The coroner found him in a locked room, slumped in a high-backed chair, the fireplace long gone cold. The estate had been modest, old furniture, a few bonds, dusty bookshelves, and the painting. Always the painting. On the fourth day, Evelyn unwrapped it. The paper tore easily, revealing a large rectangular frame made of black wood, carved with repeating symbols that seemed neither floral nor geometric. They were shapes one's eyes slid off of, too intricate to fully register, too alien to comfortably describe. The canvas inside showed a pastoral scene. Rolling hills under a bruised sky, a solitary tree standing crooked near the center, its bark grey, its branches clawing upward. Beneath the tree stood a figure, small, indistinct, painted in such a way that it blurred the more one tried to focus on it. A smear of shadow in an otherwise vivid landscape. Evelyn felt uneasy. The painting was technically beautiful, layered with care and depth. But there was something wrong beneath the surface. Something in the slope of the horizon, or the way the tree leaned, like it was bending to whisper into the figure's ear. The colors, while muted, seemed too saturated, too wet, as if the scene had only just dried. She hung it in the upstairs hallway, where the light was dim, and few guests ever walked. There it remained, the lone inheritance of a family line that had long since withered. That night, Evelyn dreamed of the tree. She stood beneath it, barefoot on dry, cracked soil. The sky above her boiled. The figure, small and blurred in the painting, was now clear. It had no face, just a void where features should have been, like a hole torn through the world's fabric. It raised one hand, and Evelyn woke gasping, her sheets tangled around her like restraints. She dismissed it. Dreams meant nothing. But in the days that followed, she began to notice things. The air upstairs felt thicker, as if humidity lingered only in the painting's proximity. The bulbs in the hallway would burn out within hours, no matter how new. Her cat Maisie refused to climb the stairs at all, yowling if forced near the landing. The painting's surface changed. Not obviously, not in ways she could capture or prove, but the sky darkened by degrees. The figure under the tree stood closer. The tree itself bent further, its limbs like grasping fingers. Evelyn stopped walking that hall unless necessary. She told herself it was superstition, imagination. Her uncle had been an eccentric man after all. Perhaps the painting had always been like that. Perhaps age and suggestion were playing tricks on her. Then came the knocking, soft, deliberate, from behind the wall where the painting hung. Only at night. Only between 3 and 4 a.m. She opened the wall once, cutting away plaster with shaking hands. Nothing. Empty studs, cold pipes, no pests, no drafts, just silence. But the next night, the knocking returned. She began to hear footsteps on the floor above her, slow, dragging steps that crossed the length of the attic she never used. Dust fell from the ceiling in her bedroom. The pull-down ladder remained sealed, padlocked since she moved in. The dreams grew worse. She stood closer to the tree each night. The figure no longer raised a hand. It reached. It reached toward her, its limbs too long, its fingers impossibly thin. The sky above it pulsed like a wound. One morning she woke with dirt under her fingernails. The hallway smelled of rot. No source. Just the scent of turned soil, of something buried too long and disturbed too recently. The bulbs in the ceiling now popped when switched on. their glass exploding outward. Evelyn covered the painting with a black cloth. The hallway light stopped blowing. The air cleared. The knocking ceased. But the dreams did not. She tried to burn it, dragged the frame into the backyard and doused it in lighter fluid. The match wouldn't catch. Not the fluid, not the canvas, not the frame. The fire died before it lived, curling into itself like a suffocated breath. She buried it instead, dug a hole in the garden 6 feet down, and laid the painting face down in the earth. Covered it, salted the soil, marked the spot with a stone. That night she dreamed of soil pressing into her mouth, her ears, her eyes. When she woke, the painting was back in the hallway. No dirt on the floor, no sign of forced entry, just the frame hanging exactly where it had before. The figure in the painting now stood directly beneath the tree, and the tree was smiling. The following days passed in slow deterioration. The house remained silent but never restful. Cold seemed to cling to the corners of the rooms, as if something beneath the floorboards exhaled a chill only the living could feel. Dust no longer gathered. It moved, lightly shifting in patterns that made no sense, like breath trapped in empty space. The portrait remained where it had always been, at the top of the stairs, framed in black wood with carvings too faded to identify. It had not changed in any way that could be measured, but something in it no longer aligned. The smile on the painted figure seemed just slightly wider, the teeth more visible. The eyes, which had once been dull and indifferent, now shimmered faintly when light caught them from below. Photographs refused to capture it. Whenever someone attempted to snap a picture, the image was corrupted, smeared with static, or simply blank. And in every attempt, the person holding the camera later complained of a splitting headache that would not pass. Footsteps began to echo at night, soft at first, then bolder. They came from the upper floor, specifically from behind the closed door of the old study across from the portrait. No one had been in that room for decades. It was sealed after the previous owner, Leonard Gresham, had been found inside, slumped over his desk, a look of terror frozen on his face. The air thickened with each passing evening. Clocks lost time. Lights dimmed. Objects shifted from where they'd been left. At times, a faint scent of oil paint and varnish lingered near the stairs, as if the portrait was still wet. And then, the mold came. It began as a discoloration on the wall behind the painting. A faint green smudge that spread despite all attempts to clean it. Bleach, scrubbing, even sanding the wall had no effect. The stain grew, and with it came a smell, earthy, damp, and old, like wet canvas left to rot in a cellar. Within a week, the mold had formed a perfect oval behind the portrait, framing it like a halo. Visitors who stayed in the house complained of nausea, headaches, and an oppressive sense of dread. One woman, a friend of the estate's new caretaker, left in the middle of the night after claiming she saw someone staring at her from the top of the stairs, a thin face grinning too widely to be real. The caretaker, an aging man named Wilmot, had no explanation. He'd lived on the property for over 20 years and had never felt uneasy before. But now, the house seemed to hum when he walked through it. Not a mechanical sound, but something more primal, like the throat of a creature waiting in stillness. He took to avoiding the second floor altogether, sleeping instead in a chair in the downstairs parlor with the television on low to fill the silence. But even then, he found himself waking at exactly 3:08 a.m. each night, the TV flickering with black and white static, the upstairs creaking as though someone walked just above. One evening, he tried removing the portrait. He approached it with a stepladder and gloves, muttering apologies to the heir, and gripped the frame with both hands. The moment he tugged, a violent surge ran through his arms, like static amplified 100-fold. He was thrown backward down the stairs, landing hard and unconscious. When he awoke, the painting remained untouched. Wilmot told no one. He moved more slowly after that, his steps cautious, as if the house itself was aware of every footfall. and the grin in the painting had changed again. No longer polite or toothy, but wider. A mouth too large for the proportions of the face. Still closed, yet somehow screaming. He boarded up the second floor the next day, hammered wooden slats across the stairwell, nailed them with shaking hands. He told himself it was a temporary fix until the mold was treated, but in truth, he was terrified to go back up. Even in daylight, the floorboards moaned overhead and shadows crossed the crack beneath the attic door. The boarded stairs did not help. On the third night, Wilmot awoke to the sound of hammering, faint, deliberate, echoing his own movements from days prior. The boards were intact, but the nails were bent backward, pulled from inside. He fled the house that morning, keys left on the hallway table. He drove without stopping, his face pale, muttering under his breath about the grin and the smell and the dream. The house stood empty for nearly 6 months. Local children dared each other to run up and touch the front door, but none stayed long. One boy claimed he heard breathing from beneath the floorboards. Another said he saw a face in the window upstairs, smiling. Eventually, the property changed hands again. A man from the city, Walter Keene, inherited it through a family trust he barely remembered. He arrived with boxes of books and an old cat named Simon. The town tried to warn him, but he was polite, distracted, dismissive. Within a week, he began experiencing the same disturbances. He wrote it off at first, drafts, creaking wood, electrical problems. But then came the mold, the blackening of the wallpaper, the vanishing of objects, the cold that settled only in the back stairwell. He found Simon hissing at nothing near the portrait, his back arched, fur bristling. He moved the cat's food and litter to the kitchen. One evening, Walter stood at the foot of the stairs, eyes locked on the painting above. He could swear the grin was wider again. The face stretched subtly at the edges, pulling back, revealing a suggestion of something beyond teeth. His hands trembled. He tried to go about his days, working from home, playing the radio loudly, sleeping with a lamp on. But the dreams returned. Ones he didn't remember having since childhood. A hallway that stretched too long. A door that didn't belong. A smile in the darkness, holding still while everything else melted. And always, the time. 3:08 a.m. He woke with his breath held, his back damp with sweat, the radio whispering a station that didn't exist. And each time, Simon was gone, only to be found later, curled on the stairs, staring up at the portrait as though it might move. The mold spread to the downstairs wall. Walter took a hammer to the frame. It didn't break. He tried fire next. The painting would not burn. He tried to bury it in the yard. By morning, it was back in its place at the top of the stairs. He began hearing music, soft, low, without melody, but persistent. It echoed in the kitchen, under the sink. It came from vents that no longer functioned. The sound made him dizzy, made the walls shimmer slightly. And when he turned off all power to the house, the music continued. The portrait's face now bore no pretense of humanity. The eyes were slits of colorless oil. The smile had opened just enough to reveal an interior, a darkness inside the paint that seemed too deep to exist on canvas. The frame itself had begun to warp, the wood twisting subtly, as though drawn toward something beyond. He stopped leaving the house. He spoke less. And one night, Simon did not return. Walter wandered the house until morning, calling the cat's name. He opened every cupboard, looked beneath furniture, even beneath floorboards in the attic. But Simon was gone. And at 3:08 a.m., the portrait grinned. Not the painted one, the real one. Walter was found 3 days later, slumped at the bottom of the stairs, eyes wide, mouth stretched in an expression that didn't match the angle of his bones. The painting hung untouched above, and the grin had never looked more alive. In the weeks that followed, the house became less a structure of wood and stone and more an extension of the thing trapped in the frame. The painting, once passive, now felt predatory. It no longer waited to be seen. It asserted itself. No matter where the painting was hung or hidden, it would find its way back to the main hall, reclaiming its original spot with uncanny precision. The hooks never moved, the frame never disturbed, yet there it was, silent, grinning, observing. Objects in the house shifted when left unwatched. A comb on the vanity would appear on the stairs. Shoes aligned with obsessive symmetry at the foot of the bed. A drawer filled with mothballs and old receipts now contained dried, crumbling petals that disintegrated to ash when touched. The thermostat failed completely. No matter the weather, the house remained cold. Not chill, cold, bone deep. An absence of warmth, as though the house were not repelling heat, but swallowing it. The upstairs guest room began to rot. That was the only word for it. The wallpaper curled inward, revealing plaster beneath marred by black fungal blooms. The ceiling sagged in the corner, soft with moisture, though there was no leak. The smell worsened, coppery and sweet, like a wound left open too long. At the center of the rot was a single painting nail hammered into the wall. No painting hung there, but each morning flakes of oil pigment lay beneath it, as if something had been displayed in the night and taken down before dawn. And yet no one entered that room, no one spoke of it. Visitors stopped arriving. Phone lines buzzed with incoherent static. Mail no longer came, save for a single envelope once, bearing no stamp, no return address. Inside, a folded note in cramped cursive. You let it see you. It won't forget. The family photo albums grew strange. Faces blurred in strange ways. Not just motion blur, but smears that seemed deliberate, as if the emulsion had been dragged by unseen fingers. In some photographs, additional figures appeared, tall, stretched, half seen in doorways or peering from windows. One photo, taken in the living room years ago, now showed the painting where it had never been before, mounted above the hearth, even though at the time it had still been locked in the attic. The sound of breathing was heard at night. Not snoring, not wind. Breathing, slow, heavy, behind the walls, sometimes under the bed, sometimes from the wardrobe. The dog disappeared. Its collar was found near the cellar door, stretched unnaturally long, the metal tag folded in half. Scratches led down the cellar stairs, deep, uneven, and dragging. At precisely 3:17 each morning, the house would creak, a single sound, loud and deliberate, from the far end of the hall, as if someone had taken a slow step across loose floorboards. But no boards were loose. The floor had been replaced, and the sound came from above, where there was no attic. The painting changed, subtly. At first, it was the background, darkening, blurring. Then the chair beneath the woman's body began to rot. The fabric sagged, and mold crept from under the legs. The woman's dress deepened in color, and the red in her brooch gleamed unnaturally, even in full darkness. Her expression, once grim, was now overtly amused. She was smiling, not kindly. The teeth were visible, too many. The eyes grew more human, more focused. The family began to forget. Names, dates, why they entered a room, why they left. Words slipped mid-sentence. Dishes left on the stove blackened and caught fire twice in 1 week. Mirrors reflected rooms as they had been, not as they were. In one, the kitchen showed the family dining together, even though they hadn't shared a meal in days. A thick residue coated the windows. It couldn't be cleaned. No solvent worked. The house dimmed. The youngest child began drawing. Circles, always circles. Some open, some closed. Sometimes layered with strange crosshatches that almost looked like figures. Arms too long, heads too small, necks bent wrong. She drew them on the walls, the furniture, the family Bible. When asked about them, she would blink slowly, as if emerging from deep water, and say, "She told me." The painting moved once. Not metaphorically. It moved. Not when seen, of course. Never when seen. But the floorboards beneath it cracked, as if under sudden pressure. The nails holding the frame shifted their angle, and the wall itself bowed slightly inward, concave, as if trying to accommodate something larger than the frame could hold. Outside, birds began avoiding the house entirely. Even in summer, no songbirds came. Cobwebs grew in places they had been cleaned. Dust gathered again, minutes after being wiped, and the woman in the portrait began to lean forward. Just slightly. But enough. Enough that it was clear she was no longer sitting for a portrait. She was watching. By the time the final week of March arrived, the house was no longer just haunted, it was transformed. The air inside felt carved from ancient wood, musty and unmoving, thick with a quiet that pulsed like a dying heartbeat. No birds sang in the woods surrounding the house. Even the wind, once a constant murmur in the branches, seemed to avoid the land, like nature itself had forgotten the place. The painting, still affixed above the fireplace, had completed its transformation. What had once been a faded pastoral scene now bore no resemblance to any world touched by sunlight. The trees within it writhed unnaturally, caught mid-contortion in shapes too broken to be real. The sky above them was pitch black, not painted but absorbed, as if the canvas had grown a hole into some deeper void. In the center stood a figure, previously half-formed, now rendered in exquisite, nightmarish detail. Its eyes were hollow voids, but its face resembled something vaguely human and disturbingly familiar. The figure wore clothing too archaic to date, and the longer one looked at it, the more it seemed to move, breathing in slow, stuttering rhythm with the house itself. The man who now lived alone in that house, the painting's final heir, was no longer the man who had arrived. His skin bore a waxy sheen, like something beginning to preserve itself from the inside. He no longer spoke aloud, no longer ate. He moved in mechanical patterns through the rooms, clutching a ledger filled with meaningless symbols, copying them endlessly into the margins of old books. He slept under the painting, not beneath it, under it. Sometime during the previous week, the wall behind the fireplace had changed. No longer brick, no longer stone. It was canvas now, a vast expanse of taut material that flexed when touched, warm and whispering. The painting had grown, expanded like a disease. What was once a frame was now a doorway, and what lay beyond was not a room. He crawled into it each night, vanishing into the ink-black woods within. When he returned, his eyes were darker, his veins more visible. He bled from the mouth but showed no pain. Sometimes, he returned with mud on his hands, sometimes with blood. There were no more visits from relatives, no more letters, no more contact with the outside world. He had stopped receiving packages, stopped paying bills. But the power remained. The lights never flickered, the clocks still ticked, though none of them kept the same time. The radios hummed, though no station could be tuned. And through it all, the house remained silent, until one night, a knock. It wasn't loud, just a single, deliberate tap against the front door. He did not answer. It came again. Same rhythm, same calm pressure. The third time it came from inside the house. He turned, slowly, with the stiffness of someone unused to motion, and saw the cellar door ajar. He had never opened the cellar, not once. He had forgotten it even existed. But there it was, yawning downward into darkness. From below came the sound of canvas ripping. He descended the stairs. Each one groaned like it hadn't been stepped on in centuries. The smell hit him halfway down, not rot, not mold, but paint thinner, fresh, wet. Behind a wall of old shelving and collapsed boxes, the source revealed itself. Another painting, framed in iron, bolted to the stone wall. This one was unfinished, its bottom third still raw canvas. But what had been painted was unmistakable. A man kneeling before a black forest, blood running from his eyes. The background was ash-colored, the sky streaked with white lines like fractures in glass. At the top of the canvas, just above the tree line, a new figure had begun to emerge. It wore no face, just a flat oval of featureless gray. But it watched. He reached toward the canvas, not with curiosity but with recognition. The surface was wet. The paint dripped without gravity. And as his fingers touched it, the house screamed, not in sound, in structure. The walls convulsed, the floors buckled, the windows all cracked at once, and outside, the trees bent inward, as if the earth itself was recoiling. The air filled with the stench of oil and burnt fabric. Lights burst, clocks stopped. And the painting above the fireplace, the first painting, peeled from the wall and landed face down, its back seared with handprints. When he woke, he was lying in the foyer. The cellar was gone. The door remained, but behind it, nothing. Just blank wall, no stairs, no space. But the new painting was in the foyer now, leaning against the front door, still unfinished, still wet. The faceless figure more defined, closer. He tried to move it, couldn't. Tried to burn it. It didn't take. Tried to leave. The door would not open. Windows wouldn't break. He was in the painting now, not trapped. Claimed.